Greetings, welcome to Facts About Everything. First off, let's look at the 10th president, John Tyler.
Is it just me, or does John Tyler look like Game of Thrones Charles Dance? I bet he can't even dance.
The main thing that's very interesting about John Tyler was that he was the first vice president to ascend to president after the death of the previous one. Now that's the purpose of a vice president, but this was a huge problem simply because it never happened before. It became a political crisis. Many people believed that Tyler was just not equipped to be president. Nevertheless, Tyler defended himself and he became the 10th president of the United States. Because William Henry Harrison died so early after Martin von Buren's term ended, there were 3 American presidents in 1 year. Tyler was playing marbles when he learned he had become president. He despised dirty fingernails. I'm pretty sure everybody hates dirty fingernails. He must have really hated them for them to be of historical significance. He was nicknamed the Accidental President. One of his most iconic quotes is, "Let it be henceforth proclaimed to the world that man's conscience was created free, that he is no longer accountable to his fellow man for the religious opinions, being responsible, therefore only to his God." He was the great-uncle of President Harry S. Truman. Tyler is personally responsible for drawing the line that shows where America ends and where Canada begins. He owned a greyhound called LaBeau, a canary called Ty, and a horse called the General. Even though he died over 150 years ago, 2 of his grandchildren are still alive today. I had to double check that, because a lot of people think that's impossible, but no, they are still alive today. He was the first president to marry while in office. Tyler had the most children of any American president, 8 from his first wife and 7 from his second wife. He died from respiratory failure. His final words were, "I am going. Perhaps it is best." And that's it. Moving on. James K. Polk was the 11th president of the United States. When Polk was a baby, his parents wanted to baptize him as a Presbyterian. However, his father wouldn't tell the minister what faith he believed in, so the minister refused to baptize Polk. However, he was baptized on his deathbed as a Methodist. He famously said, "No presidency who performs his duties faithfully and conscientiously can have any leisure." Postage stamps were put in production during his presidency. He was elected on the promise not to run for a second term in office. He placed a ban on smoking, alcohol, and dancing in the White House. He is considered to be the best president to serve 1 term. Which is weird, because he's considered to be a forgotten president, while John Adams isn't, and he only did 1 term, so Also, he's considered to be the best of the forgotten presidents. He is the only Speaker of the House in American history to become president. Polk has the shortest retirement of any American president. He died from cholera 3 months after he left office. His last words were about his wife. He said, "I love you, Sarah. For all eternity, I love you." Zachary Taylor was the 12th president of the United States. Zachary never voted before he was president. What's with his hair? What's with his hair? His nickname was Old Rough and Ready. His horse was called Old Whitey. He once said, "I have always done my duty. I am ready to die. My only regret is for the friends I leave behind me." He didn't know he was nominated for the presidency for several weeks. He seemed very indifferent to the news, probably because he assumed he was never going to win. His literacy was questionable. He could read, just about, but had great difficulty writing as he was never taught grammar or spelling correctly. He died from digestion problems after eating gone-off cherries and milk while he was still serving as president. He was the president for just over a year. His final words were, "I should not be surprised if this were to terminate in my death. I did not expect to encounter what has beset me since my elevation to the presidency. God knows I have endeavored to fulfill what I conceive to be an honest duty, but I have been mistaken. My motives have been misconstrued, and my feelings most grossly outraged." Wow, for a guy who was president for just a year, he really knew how to make an exit. Millard Fillmore was the 13th president. Okay, the first fact. Look at this guy. Tell me that Alec Baldwin was not born to play this guy. Baldwin, get on it. He was the second man to assume the presidency upon the death of a president.
I think you need a comb there, Fillmore.
He famously said, "May God save the country, for it is evident that the people will not." His nickname was the American. How uncreative. He was one of 9 children. He owned 2 ponies called Mason and Dixon. His great-grandfather was a pirate. He didn't have a vice president. He was well known for his dress sense and would often sport a custom-designed dark suit. His wife, Abigail Powers, used to be his teacher. His wife installed the first running water bath in the White House. He was the first president to have a stove in the White House. He was the first to form a permanent library in the White House. He carried a dictionary with him at all times. He personally attempted to put out a fire in December 1951 at the Library of Congress. Afterward, he signed a bill to fund the replacement of all the books. Although that all sounds great, Fillmore was not remembered as being a good president. One of the many negative quotes that was said about him is, "To discuss Millard Fillmore is to overrate him." Before he died from the after effects of a stroke, he drank soup. His last words were, "The nourishment is palatable." Franklin Pierce was the 14th President of the United States. Pierce was arrested while he was president for running over a woman with a horse. Wow, that's a really bad precedent. I mean, people make fun of George W. Bush for choking on a pretzel. He was nicknamed Handsome Frank. He once said, "The dangers of a concentration of all power in the general government of a confederacy so vast as ours are too obvious to be disregarded." He was the first president to make his inaugural speech from memory. It was 3,000 words long. At his inauguration, he refused to swear in the Bible and instead affirmed his oath on a law book. Pierce went to the same college as Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote the famous novel The Scarlet Letter. On top of that, Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote Franklin Pierce's biography. He died from cirrhosis, which is liver damage due to excessive alcohol consumption. James Buchanan was the 15th President of the United States.
Is it just me, or does James Buchanan look an awful lot like the actor John Lithgow? Why does every president look like a famous actor?
Buchanan had a pet elephant and a terrier called Punch. His most iconic quote is, "What is right and what is practical are two different things." Okay, this is a big one. Biographer Shelley Ross, sociologist Jan Baker, author Robert O. Watson, and historian John Howard believe that Buchanan was the first gay president. It is believed that he had an ongoing relationship with Franklin Pierce's vice president, Rufus King. Even President Andrew Jackson mocked King for his feminine traits by calling him Miss Nancy. King died before Buchanan became president.
What's with his hair? What's with every president's hair? Seriously.
Since he was unmarried, his niece Harriet became the hostess for events at the White House. Buchanan's fiancée was said to have died of hysteria, which is no longer considered a categorized mental illness. Her doctor, Dr. Chapman, said it was the first time he had ever seen this mental illness firsthand. After his fiancée died, Buchanan never seemed to show the slightest interest in women for the rest of his life. Buchanan is the only American president to never marry. He was so against slavery that he would buy slaves just so he could free them. Although these all sound like incredible things, Buchanan is considered to be one of the worst presidents ever.
Probably because of his hair.
He was ranked the 40th best president on an academic poll performed by 47 British academics specializing in American history and politics. Every Sunday, Buchanan bought a 10-gallon jug of whiskey. He would drink cognac and up to 2 bottles of alcohol every day. Bizarrely, he was extraordinary at handling his alcohol. One report said, "There was no headache, no faltering steps, no flushed cheek. All was as cool, calm and cautious and watchful as in the beginning." He was nicknamed 10-Cent Jimmy, as he believed that 10 cents was enough to live off for a day. He was the last pre-Civil War president. He died from respiratory failure. 20,000 people lined the streets during his funeral.
Probably to see his hair.
His final words were, "O Lord God Almighty, as thou wilt."
Special thanks to these fine people for all their help. Be sure to subscribe to Facts About Everything. Follow me on Twitter for updates on upcoming videos. Check out my Facebook page to let me know what subjects you want me to talk about in the future.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.